You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. So, before we get to it, I just wanted to take a minute here, up at the top, and thank everyone at Thompson Bike Tours who helped make our feisty Girona gravel camp such an incredible success. The riding in that part of Spain is astronomically out of this world, and we were able to be way off the beaten path with barely any cars besides the ones that were supporting us. And wow, what a week it was. Our goal when we put it together was to give midlife women a chance to bond and challenge themselves and just have a week of reflection and introspection. And wow, it just did not disappoint. I feel like we all learned and grew and just had one hell of a good time. Definitely a trip of a lifetime. So thank you, Thompson, and thank you to the Feisty team, especially my partner out there, Catherine Taylor, who was along with us in Girona, for making it such a special week. All right. So this week on the show, I have a really great conversation on cognitive health, which is something that comes up a lot in our community as women often struggle with word recall and stress and brain fog and low moods and all the stuff that comes along with our changing hormones in midlife and menopause. So I sat down with Dr. Therese Huston, who is a cognitive neuroscientist and author of 4 books, including Sharp, 14 Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. And we just get into it. What's going on with our brains right now and all the ways that she counsels clients to lower their stress and reclaim their cognition. And we also take quite a few fun tangents in this one, like how to stop ruminating, which maybe is something that I wanted to know, and how to boost motivation and all of these things. She recommends at one point a dopamine playlist, and I have been working on that ever since. Anyway, Therese was a real joy to speak with, and it's clear she's very good at this speaker thing. She frequently gives talks and runs workshops for organizations like Microsoft and Amazon, Morgan Stanley, Strava, and the Cleveland Clinic. She is also a runner and loves a good 5K, especially when the rain takes a pause in her hometown of Seattle. You can find her and her book and more about her work at theresehuston.com. I will link that in the show notes so it's easy to find. I will also link the mental health app that she recommends from Healthy Minds. And a quick note about that during the conversation, she said that the neuroscientist who founded that app was Dr. Richard Wright, and she meant to say Richard Davidson. So I told her I would be happy to correct that right up here as well. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So, speaking of brain health and other great information you can use, I just wanted to let everybody know that Feisty, the parent company that does this podcast and that I work for, has been hard at work creating more courses for our community. And right now, we are putting together 2 mini courses, including one that I have been working away on called the Perimenopause Starter Pack, which is pretty much a soup to nuts look at everything you need to know about perimenopause and the fundamentals of performance and nutrition and lifestyle that can make life way easier during this challenging transition. And our resident performance endocrinologist, Dr. Carla DiGirolamo, is also putting together a mini course, and hers will be Hormone Therapy Quick Start Guide, which is going to be an invaluable resource, putting together all the information you need to know about hormone therapy, what it is, the forms and formulations available, what you need to know about starting and or stopping, all of it in one place. They are both short courses designed to be able to complete them quickly and then come back to them for reference whenever you need. We are also creating another brand new course, a bit longer on this one, on brain health called Brain Power. And this goes deep into brain health topics like cognitive decline and mental well-being with a full suite of experts. All of this, along with our other popular courses, will be available on demand starting June 9th. The best way to make sure you get all the news about our courses and our offerings as they come up is to sign up for that free weekly newsletter I am always talking about in these intros, my Feisty 40 Plus newsletter. There's a link in the show notes. Hit it, sign up. You'll get all the news you can use on training and what we're offering and more. All right. Super quick thanks for the kind reviews and ratings that continue to roll in. I have some really exciting guests on tap for the next couple months, and those reviews really help make them possible. And if you like the show, please share it. Believe it or not, old-fashioned word of mouth is still the biggest ways that shows like mine can grow. So if you have shared it, thank you. If you haven't, share it with a friend. Finally, thanks to Parody Sports for their continued support. If you need active underwear that won't bunch up or be a drag, Parody has you covered. For real. All right. Enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right, Therese, welcome to our show. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Celine. It is a real treat to be here.
So let's talk first a bit. I always like to get a little bit about the background because I understand that you are not only a cognitive neuroscientist, which is why you're here, that's important. You're also a runner, correct?
I am a runner and I've tried longer distances in my younger years. I've done a half marathon and I used to really like 10Ks. But as my joints, especially my knees, get less happy with age, 5Ks are my sweet spot. And
Nothing
the
wrong with a good 5K.
oh my goodness, you can sign up for the last minute at the last minute and still do them, right? So
Yep.
and what's nice is as you get older, there are fewer and fewer women running 5Ks, at least I'm finding. And
Oh,
so,
that's interesting.
yeah, I'm finding myself placing in the top 3, which was not the case 20 years ago. So I'm loving the 5Ks.
Oh, that's pretty rad.
That's
Do
really
you
cool.
mind if I ask your age category?
No, I'm
I don't know how
56.
old you are. You're
Just turned
56?
56. Yeah.
We are both just turned 56. I just turned 56 in February.
Very nice.
Yeah. And how did you get into neuroscience? What was the draw?
I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I wanted to do the hardest thing that I could do, right? When I was in applying for graduate schools and when I was in college. And the hardest thing that I could think of that I could do well was neuroscience. So I dug into it. The people I respected most were doing neuroscience. This was back in the 90s when neuroscience was so boring. It was like the early Wright brothers, the equivalent in neuroscience, where basically they were just putting, they're just making sure everything was safe and that putting people in scanners wasn't going to be dangerous. But the science was hard and it was fascinating and there was so much to learn. And so I was doing, but the downside to it was I was often the only woman in the room,
Hmm.
or at most there'd be two of us in the lab, and then there'd be 15, 20 men. And so, but that to me often was a sign that, oh, this is tough. This is really hard stuff, right? The downside was, I was often silent because it was tricky to be the only woman in the room. It's always hard to be the only, right? Thankfully, there's
Hmm.
more women in neuroscience now, but it's still pretty male dominated. But anyway, I was drawn to how hard it was, and the problems were fascinating, and they just get more fascinating because, as we'll talk about today, neuroscience is finally useful. We're finally getting great findings about life changes, behavioral changes, things we can be doing to give ourselves better brains as we go forward in life.
Yeah, that's really important for our audience. Our audience hears a lot about brain changes in perimenopause. They experience brain fog. It becomes quite real in their lives. I hear this all the time.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't affect their mood and their motivation, but their work, their sport. It crosses all boundaries. And so we're very keenly interested in brain health. And you have this new book out, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. And I think that that's great. Like just giving people sort of simple, applicable advice to help them with something that is literally like our black box up there is
Exactly.
is helpful.
And I wanted to, a lot of the book focuses on strategies that you can do in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, things you can do from your desk. Yes, there are wonderful strategies for going outdoors. Let's do that as well. But so many of us are looking for ways to stay engage with our work and yet still get a restorative break in a way that's really going to improve our performance, but also what a bonus if it actually helps your brain, let's do that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So when you first reached out to me, one of the things that you talked about as a topic that you wanted to cover was this idea of short breaks that women need in midlife to reduce stress. Sure, boost memory. I mean, we're all feeling it a lot maybe these days. So let's talk about that. We talk a lot about sleep, which can be difficult. Let's acknowledge that. It can be difficult during the menopause transition for sure. But what were you thinking there as far as what women need to do during the day for themselves?
So sleep, obviously, getting a good night's sleep is crucial. And but you've had other fabulous episodes on that, and people can take a look at the other good resources you've got there. But let's think about short breaks you can take during the day. And if you don't mind, first, can we talk about the ineffective breaks? Because there are some ways,
Sure.
right? There's great
Scrolling on my phone, is that an ineffective break?
Could certainly be problematic. So when it comes to social media, the research on this is pretty mixed, but unfortunately, a lot of it's done with like college age populations. It's not done with women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. What I like to think of if you're going to take a social media break, take a joy scrolling break, not a doom scrolling break.
Mm,
Right? So getting on your phone and or getting, opening up YouTube or Instagram and looking for things that are going to make you happy. There's great research showing that when you're stressed, one of the things that goes down is your creativity and laughing. Getting yourself in a good mood will immediately boost your creativity because it lowers stress. And so joy focus on joy scrolling if you're going to take a social media break. So that will help improve your mood as well as reduce your stress in the moment and help your performance. A couple other strategies that are potentially problematic: long naps. So, on the one hand, I know you're an ultra runner, right? You might need a long nap to recover on the day when you do that.
I'm more of an ultra cyclist, but yes,
Oh,
on
more of an
any,
ultra cyclist,
yeah,
right? Oh, more
any,
of an
I
ultra
did, I
cyclist.
did, I did one mini ultra run. I have dabbled in that area, but I am mostly on two wheels. But
Ah, okay, okay,
yes,
great. That's right. I forgot. Um, in any case, so doing if you're going to do really hard training, that's one thing. But if you're just thinking, oh, I could fit in an hour nap today at 3 o'clock, that could actually do a lot more harm than good. A 20-minute nap early in the day, fabulous. Before 1 o'clock can really help restore your energy. But you don't want to nap longer than 20, maximum 30 minutes because you actually can then feel more tired and more groggy the rest of the day, especially after 3 o'clock. That's going to interfere with your sleep at night, and that's going to hurt your ability to recover cognitively and physically. So, really long naps late in the day, a problem. Another one that's problematic is going and venting to someone without any solutions being put on the table. So let's say you just had something really frustrating happen at work or with your family, and you want to go vent to either a partner or a colleague. What you want to do is start that conversation by saying, I'm going to vent for a moment and then I want to turn to solutions, right? Because simply venting without moving towards solution focused is going to increase your sense of frustration. It's going to increase your anxiety. And you don't just discharge all of that energy. Instead, you've now justified how you're feeling. You begin to ruminate. It can create more problems for you. So much better to like, okay, I got that off my chest. Now let's get into solution focused coping. I really want to talk about solutions. So this might be something you wouldn't do with someone you know only casually. That might be something you do with someone you know well. So just be careful about the venting. Venting, you need to move to strategies quickly if you're going to vent. And the other strategy that has mixed results is caffeine. So
Mm.
have you talked much about caffeine on the show? Is that something you guys have
I
delved
mean, it
into?
has come up here and there. I've not never done a full show on caffeine.
Okay.
A lot of people obviously use it. It's a
Yes,
very,
exactly. Right. I sure do.
yeah,
So caffeine, some people love to take a caffeine break. They start to feel sleepy around 2 in the afternoon.
like a nappuccino.
Exactly, a nappuccino. Well said.
Mm.
And caffeine, so the study's older, it's from 2015, but there was a study showing, at least comparing women who use caffeine versus women who don't use caffeine. Women who use caffeine tend to have more hot flashes than women who don't
Hmm.
use caffeine. And so that can be a problem if hot flashes are an issue for you. But also, caffeine, not only can it make it difficult to sleep at night, caffeine can do a number on you in terms of and giving you jitters and increasing anxiety. And so that can make it hard to focus and calm down. So caffeine is mixed. Caffeine increases dopamine, so it might give you a boost of motivation. So you've got it. Caffeine is tricky. You want to figure out for yourself kind of what's the window of when can I can have caffeine and when I shouldn't.
Do women become more sensitive to it with the transition? Do you know? I hear from women in the group that they do not tolerate it quite as well as they used to. And I wonder if there is, we talked before we hit record that there's a lot of conversation around cortisol, a lot of
Mhm.
conversation around the stress response with women in the menopause transition. And I do hear that women will post in our group saying, I don't do as well with caffeine or as much caffeine as I used to, and I'm wondering if there's a connection there.
I haven't seen, there could be data on that. I haven't seen any. I know for myself that I need to stop caffeines earlier in the day than I used to, and that
Hmm.
makes a big difference in terms of my being able to fall asleep quickly. But I don't know if there's data on that. That's a great
And
question.
there's different metabolizers of it, right? I mean, I've actually been tested. I'm a very fast caffeine metabolizer.
Yes. Yeah. And there's actually a genetic component to that in
Hmm.
terms of whether you're going to be a fast metabolizer or a slow metabolizer. And so you could get, well, I guess 23andMe is no longer an option, but
Yeah, I know.
there are
No,
other alternatives, right, to find out if you're a quicker, fat, slow metabolizer of caffeine.
in the book you talk about perhaps giving tea a chance because of the other components in it.
Thanks for bringing that up. Tea, if you're going to do caffeine and you found that Red Bull or coffee
I'm
doesn't.
an espresso person. I'm never
You're an
giving it up, but that's
espresso.
fine.
There we go. I'm not going to convert you. That's
Okay.
fine. But if you're someone who is trying to figure out the caffeine equation for yourself, tea could be your solution. And the reason is that tea, unlike coffee, tea contains both caffeine and something called L-theanine, which is an amino acid. We can just call it theanine. So theanine is an amino acid that, when combined with caffeine, does two wonderful things. So one, it reduces those jitters so that people don't get the jitters from the caffeine. It seems to attenuate those. But the other beautiful thing is that it can improve your ability to do multitasking. And they think that's because it's changing how a certain network of brain regions works called the default mode network. Basically, the default mode network is a network of brain regions that, when they get activated, you're 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 more easily distracted by your own internal thoughts.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that L-theanine seems to do is it seems to dial down the default mode network. And as a result, people find it easier to multitask. There's lots of problems with multitasking. I'm not recommending it. You're better to single task. But if your life involves a lot of multitasking, or your day is going to involve a lot of multitasking, tea might be the way to go, because it's going to increase your ability to go from the main task that you care about to this little task that I've got to do. And then I got to get back to the main task. It's going to make it much easier for you to dive back into your main task.
Hmm.
So it's, anyway, worth noting. And if you're not someone who's, you're just like, you know what, Therese, no matter how convincing you are, I'm going to stick with my espresso. You can take L-theanine at 200 milligram, or actually 100 milligram would be the right dose. 200 milligrams, you're actually going to start to get sleepy. So anywhere from 60 to 100 milligram,
Hmm.
you can take it as a supplement, and that will give you that same boost, but so it can balance out the effects of coffee.
Would you actually take it with your coffee?
Yeah, you can take it with your coffee. Exactly. Yep.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so 60 to 100 milligrams. I
Hmm.
haven't tried it because tea is my go-to, but my husband does it and he finds it's wonderful.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
I will give that a shot. See, that
it's
I
what
will
they,
give a shot.
it's what they do in the lab. Rather than giving
Yeah.
people tea, they will give them L-theanine plus caffeine.
So you mentioned rumination, that when you were talking about the venting thing, like you want to sort of go into the okay problem solving part of that as opposed to just the discharge. And rumination is also something that I do hear an awful lot in the group. Do you have any nice tips to stop ruminating? I'm asking for myself now.
So some nice tips for ruminating. Part of the issue is to learn to catch yourself when you're doing it, right? Because all too often we just go down a rabbit hole and we will be justifying the thinking that we're doing, particularly if you're conflict avoidant, if you're trying to justify having a difficult conversation with someone. I'm
I'm
not.
just disaster casting,
Yeah.
really. That's all I'm doing. I'm just playing out the worst case
Playing,
scenarios.
yes.
Like,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So well said. Okay, so in a situation like that, I would do some if-then journaling. So
Mm,
by if-then journaling or if-then statements, there's great research showing that uh, working, and this isn't brain science, this is just more psychology research. So if-then statements would be, if blank happens, then I will this, right? So if you're disaster casting, you could say, all right, I need to go over to my in-laws, and if my mother-in-law says this, then I will say this, or I will leave the room, or I will pinch my partner, right? Speak up now, right? So doing if-then strategizing can bump you out of rumination mode. It can also actually improve your ability to cope when the situation obviously comes up because you will have
right.
generated possibilities. So it's nice in the moment and it's nice longer term. And you can then also discuss those with somebody else, review your list of here's my if then statements and reality test. You think this would actually work. And that can also improve your ability to problem solve.
Excellent. Thank you.
I
And
love
for people, thank you. And
it.
for people who can't take naps, and there are many, but
Sure.
still crave that whatever regeneration that they can get from that, I've heard people talk about deep rest moments of, other things that you can do, even if you're in your office to get some of that centering regeneration. Can we talk a bit about things that people can do if they can't actually just lie down?
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about a few. Let's start with the one that few people would know about, I think, unless you're a neuroscientist, researcher, and and then we'll move to some that are perhaps more common and that perhaps people haven't committed to doing, but after they hear this conversation, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to try that." So the one that's most unconventional is to take an affection break. So affection, not infection, affection break. And the idea here is that uh, about 20 seconds of physical affection will reduce your cortisol levels. Some of these studies have been done in the lab where people bring in their significant other, their partner, and they just do a 20-second hug
Hmm.
right before a very stressful event. And it actually lowers cortisol more so for women than for men, which is a really interesting finding. So, this is especially true for this population, although these were younger couples that were brought in for this. Now, some people are probably listening and thinking, great, Therese, but I don't have a partner to
Who can I
cuddle.
hug? I
Well, who
know.
can I hug? Right. Or I'm in my office. That would be very inappropriate to go and hug anyone. The beauty of this is they've actually found that simply putting self-affection works too. So that could mean putting both hands, in the research study they did, the studies I've seen on this, they have people put both hands on their heart and just hold it there for 20 seconds and focus on the warmth that they're feeling. Um, Kristen Neff, who does great work on self-compassion research, she has people gently rub their upper shoulders, so, like a self hug. Whatever makes you feel comforted, do it for 20 seconds. The research actually shows this will also lower cortisol levels. And so it's a great way, it might be hard to do in a team meeting, right? But you can do it before the team meeting. And this is a simple way and just focusing on it. And it's surprising. 20 seconds of this, you'll find that like, oh, actually that's so simple, and yet I actually feel more restored. So it lowers cortisol levels and immediately gives you this sense of like, ah. So affection break, that would be one. Is that one that you were familiar
I
with?
have never heard about an affection break, but
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense to me. And I do like, I mean, when possible, I like a good hug.
Yeah. From the right person.
Right, well, that's true. Right. Otherwise, it raises the cortisol and is counterproductive.
Exactly, exactly. But this has been something that I even do when I mentioned my in-laws. I have a stressful relationship with my mother-in-law. If we're talking politics or something that is just stressing me out, I go into the restroom, do 20-second self-hug. I feel I can come back out and handle it again. So anyway, the 20-second affection break. Now let's get into a couple of ways to take breaks that are strategies that people are going to be more familiar with. So first of all, meditation.
Mhm.
Meditation is fabulous, and there are research studies showing that for women in going through either perimenopause or postmenopause, that meditation helps with a number of things. It can reduce hot flashes. I haven't seen it lowering cortisol levels per se, but it reduces anxiety, depression. It has a bunch of benefits. It also improves memory. As little as a 10-minute meditation will, one study at least shows that it improves immediate recall by 75%. So if you're about to go into something, you're about to go into a meeting where you need to learn a bunch of names, if you can do a 10-minute meditation before you walk into, just get on YouTube, find your 10-minute meditation, and then you walk into that room and your chances are you're going to have much better ability to learn and recall those names. So meditation has wonderful benefits, and as little as 10 minutes makes a big difference. The
What is it
longer,
doing?
beg your
I'm
pardon?
sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Like, what's the science happening? What's happening in your brain that meditation is facilitating that?
Sure. So a couple of different things are going on there. So first of all, I just mentioned this default mode network. So one of the things that it's doing is it's quieting the default mode network, and as a result, you're better able to focus. So the default mode network, it's not evil. It's helping you be creative. It's helping you decide. You might be brainstorming something. The default mode network is going to be kind of pinging around, but it means that you're less focused, right? So if the default mode network is highly active, it can often mean that, you know, great for thinking about a whole bunch of things, bad for being centered and focused. So one of the things that meditation does is it calms down this default mode network, and as a result, people feel like I am here right now, right with you. And as a result, because it's improving focus, when someone introduces themselves, instead of thinking about seven things like, oh my gosh, my hands are sweaty. When I shake your hand, you're just focused on their name and their face, right? So it's calming the default mode network. That's one of the main things that it does. Long-term meditation, so people who meditate 8 weeks or more on a regular basis, they also get increased growth in their hippocampus, which is a crucial brain area for memory. And so you're basically getting more real estate for learning those names. So long-term meditation
Wow.
practice, you there's so few things that help us gain brain as we age. Meditation is one of them.
People are so intimidated, I think, by that word, meditation. It
Oh,
because it sounds mysterious. When
wow.
you talk to people who about meditation, I mean, a lot of people are just still like, I don't know how to do it. They sit there and they feel like they're doing it wrong. It causes some and like, do you have some easy entry ways into this simple meditation?
I do. So what I would recommend, I have no affiliation with this, what I'm about to recommend whatsoever. I really like something called the Healthy Minds app. So this is
Hmm.
out of University of Wisconsin. I think there's a neuroscientist who started this, which gives it even more credibility. I think his name is Richard Wright. So it's free. You can donate, but downloading the app is free, and it's not a freemium. Like
Right.
all the whole thing is open to
Yeah.
you, free from day one. And what's beautiful about it is they have, you could search for stress and overwhelm or sleep. You can look for a specific topic,
Ooh.
which is really nice. And the meditations range from, I did a sleep meditation last night that was 11 minutes. They also have sleep meditations that are close to 30 minutes. But what's beautiful about this is they have a course that you take where it alternates back and forth between, here's a 6-minute explanation of why, for instance, what do we mean by openness, and how can you improve openness, and then you do a meditation on openness. And what's beautiful is, first of all, there are 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute. You can pick the length that you want. So if you only have 5 minutes, you do a little meditation snack. If you have 20 minutes, you can do a longer one. But my favorite part about this, Celine, is they have active meditation. So you decide, do I want to sit or do I want to move?
Oh.
Yes, I know your eyes just got big. I love it.
Yeah, because I could walk around my lovely tree-lined neighborhood and do that. Yeah.
And do this, right? And that's what I do in the morning. I'm trying to get some morning sunlight. I'm trying to get a walk in my
Yep.
neighborhood. I pick a 10-minute choice.
Hmm.
All the meditations in that course give you the option. Do I want it to be active or do you want it to be sitting? And so they assume that you're moving. And so they'll say things like, now I want you to pay attention to your feeling of your feet or the way your clothes are brushing against your skin. So they give you different things to focus on. So if I can't do any other meditation, I find, or while you're doing the dishes, right? So what's beautiful about this, you can always find a way to fit it in. At least I can, and I think most people would find that they can find 5 minutes while they're doing the
Oh
dishes
yeah.
to listen to one.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will 100% check that out.
And I have paid subscriptions to things like Calm. There are other
Yeah.
wonderful ones that I use regularly. But what's beautiful about this, they're short, they're active, and they're free.
Love it. Were you going to say something besides the meditation when I stepped in there?
Oh, sure. No, the other two breaks that I would recommend if you can, if you can step away from your desk, nature walks, right? You've done a wonderful piece on that. Uh, I don't know if you
Forest
want
bathing.
anything. What's that?
Forest bathing.
Forest bathing, exactly. And the
Green
research is
space
showing
is good for you.
green space is so good for you. Oh, yeah. Ideally, you want to live near green space, but if not, a 20-minute walk can do wonders. So getting out and walking is good. Yoga is also wonderful, and that can be something that if you can, close your door and do, 5 minutes of yoga is going to be better than no minutes of yoga. So a little bit of yoga can, and especially if you have a regular yoga practice, it's going to reduce cortisol levels. And there has been research specifically in perimenopausal and postmenopausal women showing that it can reduce hot, it can reduce anxiety and depression. It's mixed on hot flashes. Right? It depends on the study, so that one's a little bit more tricky. But yoga is really nice.
And are there any we've talked about breath work on this show, and I'm wondering if breath work is part and parcel of any of this. I mean, obviously it comes into yoga. I don't know how much they talk about it in these meditation apps, but I imagine there's some mention of breath.
Yeah, I'd love to, if would you be open to doing a quick demonstration of a
Sure, of
breathing
course.
exercise? Okay, great,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Okay.
And anyone who's listening in can do this along with us. So one of the things that's going to be one of the best, there are many different breathing techniques that are studied. The one I'm going to demonstrate right now both reduces anxiety, but what's also beautiful, it improves decision making. So for someone who's feeling brain fog, who's feeling like I've got too much coming at me, this very simple exercise, and you can do it at your desk. You can even do it in a meeting because nobody's going to know you're doing it, which I love. And this very simple activity will sharpen your ability to sort what's important from what's unimportant. So what we're going to do is something called a 5-2-7 breath. A lot of people know about box breathing, which is more four,
Hmm.
four, four, four. We're going to do 5-2-7. So what that's going to mean is a 5-second inhale, 2-second hold, 7-second exhale, and we'll do 2 rounds. The 5-second inhale is usually the hardest part for people, although with all your athletes, breathing is perhaps something that they do better than the average bear. But what we're going to do is if you find that you are having trouble inhaling for 5 full seconds, just stop inhaling whenever, 4 seconds, and then just hold for a little bit longer. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay, great. So exhale, and I'll count out loud. We're going to inhale for 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 2. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, inhale 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 2. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, how do you feel?
That felt kind of nice.
Oh, it's kind
Yep.
of nice, right? Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. In the lab, what they do is they do this for 2 minutes. So we just did
Wow.
that for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. You would want to do a couple of cycles, right? A few more cycles than what we did. And what they find is 2 minutes of that 5-2-7 breathing has immediate improvements in your ability to make more objectively better decisions, right? They put people in stressful situations. They give them a bunch of decisions to make, and people make fewer errors, and they make more good decisions when they do this for 2 minutes. But it also will reduce your stress levels. And again, particularly if you practice this regularly, you can then easily do it without anybody knowing. So
Yeah.
it's
And
a
it
nice one.
feels like something that also might be useful when you're too amped up before an event.
Ooh, interesting. Say more.
Well, in your book, and I had mentioned this to you when we were talking before we got on the show, you have this great little piece about pre anything jitters, right? You're nervous before a talk, you're nervous before whatever. A lot of people in our office get, and I put my hands up, terrible, terrible race day nerves,
Mhm.
where it took me many years to think, okay, I just need to harness these butterflies. These butterflies are potential energy. I'm just going to harness them. And you actually use some of the same language in your book, which I loved, like get the butterflies in formation. But I feel like when it's hard to even center enough to get the butterflies going, just doing that feels like it could just bring me to a place where I would be able to start my pre-race rituals that I have and all of that stuff.
Yes, yes. And so what you're doing there is beautiful because you're regulating your breathing. If your breathing is getting out of sync, right? You're putting yourself in a more relaxed state. You're actually activating your parasympathetic nervous system. Right? I mean, you want your sympathetic nervous system to be charged up for a big race, but you don't want it to be to the point where you're now potentially going to choke or not choke.
Right.
Yeah, but like be in a state where it's hard to perform. So this can help pre-race jitters, pre-race nerves. What's what I also like about it, or actually a different strategy I want to also underline about the butterflies in formation, is that you want to do reframing. So there's very powerful work showing that if you can reframe what's happening as this is excitement, not anxiety. This is
I
excitement.
try that all the time. I'm just stoked.
Does it right?
I'm not terrified. I am just excited.
I'm just excited. Yeah, I was just supporting a family member before a triathlon, and he was so nervous about getting into that cold water, and I was trying to coach him on this, right? I'm stoked, not anxious. Stoked, not nervous. What they actually find is that by doing that, by saying I'm excited, not anxious, by reframing, it's called cognitive reframing. By reframing, they actually find that uh, your blood flow is going to go your blood flow is increased when you're because your sympathetic nervous system is up. So it doesn't reduce the blood flow, but what it does is it allows vasodilation. So basically your blood vessels are giving the blood more space, whereas if you keep telling yourself I'm anxious, oh crap, why did I sign up for this, you get vasoconstriction and your
Oh,
blood
that's not
pressure
what you
goes up.
want.
What's
Yeah.
that?
That's not what you want. You don't want
Not what you want. No,
vasoconstriction.
you don't. So even though it just seems like that's just a mind trick, Therese, what you're actually doing, that mind trick actually influences your body's response. It's basically saying, I am prepared for this, I trained for this, I am ready for this. And so you're helping your body have a productive response by saying, I'm excited, not anxious.
I love that. Yeah. I do that too. I over the years I have collected a lot of strategies
I
to get
believe it.
myself to the start line in
I think you're more in tune with your body than most. So good
in
job.
one mental piece. But it's real. I mean, those feelings and that is the kind of stuff you can use all through your life. There's all kinds of things that cause us anxiety, right? And
Exactly.
and
Performance anxiety,
yeah,
relationship anxiety, whatever it might be. I'm excited, not anxious. Yep.
I love it. You talked about cortisol a couple times, and this comes up an awful lot in our group as
Yep.
far as once the hormones kind of decline, once and maybe it's also along with the anxiety and the depression and things that women face, like estrogen declines, the neurotransmitters get a little wacky, they change. Can we talk a little bit about that relationship and how we can support ourselves through this transition with brain science?
So I think one of the things that's helpful to understand about cortisol, especially if you're noticing that you're responding differently to stressful situations that perhaps didn't bother you
Mm-hmm.
in the past. So let's compare men and women in their cortisol response to a highly stressful situation. So whether that's you're about to do an event, a race, or it might be you're about to give a talk, or you're about to meet your partner's parents for the first time, right? So you've got this acutely stressful event just about to happen. What happens for men at pretty much any age, as far as I've seen in the research, is they have a much bigger cortisol spike initially than women do. So they have a big cortisol. So compared to women, stressful events about to happen, men have a bigger cortisol spike, so they might have a bigger freak out, but then their cortisol levels drop back to normal much quicker than women. And that's true for younger women. Younger women, so they have initially that cortisol spike isn't as high, but their cortisol stays in their system a lot longer. And that's so it's one of the things that researchers are pointing to as to why women tend to feel more burnt out in
Hmm.
their careers, because stressful experiences don't just flush out of their system. Instead, they're frustrated by them, upset by them, because in part because that cortisol is staying in their system longer. Now, the problem is that as when estrogen levels drop, it was estrogen that was helping to keep that cortisol spike low initially. So if
Yeah.
estrogen levels go down, women get a double whammy. So older women,
I
so
feel it. I
you
feel
feel
it.
it exactly. So now their initial cortisol spike looks much more like men's, so it's no longer lower. Now the initial cortisol spike's just as high, but it's also staying in their system longer.
Right.
So you feel it more initially. Things feel more alarming than they used to, but also you're also just not recovering as quickly as your partner who might be the same age. If he's male, he's recovering a lot faster than you are. So this is really tricky because basically, we're getting the stronger dose of cortisol than we're used to initially, but we still have that long tail of cortisol that just isn't being cleared out of our system as quickly. So cortisol gets much harder as we get older, so, at least as certainly as women get older. So there are a couple of different things that you can do. So the nature walks, the researchers find that a 20 to 30-minute nature walk is a beautiful way to reduce cortisol in your system. The affection that we were talking about earlier, even just self-affection, will reduce cortisol levels. But affection from a partner is nice too. If that's, if you both work from home, meet in the hallway and hug. My partner and I, we joke about, we set a 20-second timer, right? Like I need the 20-second hug right now. So that's just a humorous thing that we do. But other things that can help reduce cortisol levels, yoga is one, and yoga reduces cortisol levels at wake, during the afternoon, as well as before bed. Some women might be thinking, oh, but I'm having trouble getting motivated in the morning. I don't want lower cortisol levels in the morning. That would be a problematic for me. So that might be something to think about. But the fact that you're basically flushing more cortisol out of your system later in the day is going to help you with sleep and coping. So yoga is wonderful for cortisol levels. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Are there other ones that you can think of that also help with reducing cortisol levels? Those are the ones that immediately come to mind for me.
Where do you think that exercise fits into that equation?
Yes. So the, things like Pilates and yoga, so these mind body exercise activities reduce cortisol. There's a great meta analysis done by Wang just last year, Wang and colleagues, where there was an international study looking at many different mind body interventions where exercise was involved, and they found that things like Pilates and yoga were reducing cortisol levels. But it's tricky with more high intensity activities. I'm not an expert in those. I know that they can increase it initially, which can help you perform. I just don't know how long term, like, over the course of the race, when you're done with the race, do your cortisol levels return back to normal more quickly? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed reviews on that. One of the things that I see frequently is that high, shorter bursts of high intensity exercise, obviously you need cortisol to perform, you need it for exercise. They'll go up, but it comes down and it also just seems to make you more stress resilient over time.
Yes, right.
But when you talk about like the long stuff, when you talk about the marathons, the ultra running, all of that, there
Right.
does seem to be a bit of a cortisol creep. How much meaning we put on that, I don't know. They
Mm.
check people's hair and they have like
Yeah.
endurance athletes have more cortisol in their hair. Like that's just like something
Oh,
that,
I didn't.
yeah, it's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
interesting research. But I never want to draw a lot of hard lines there because
Sure.
if you seem to be functioning and you're fine, then, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean for your life?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think the only other one that I would add to our list, and we've already mentioned it, is meditation. So research studies show that particularly a long-term meditation practice, by long-term, I mean 8 weeks.
Hmm.
So, get on Healthy Minds, try to do it 5 or 6 days a week for 5 to 10 minutes. And what you should find is that you should find yourself less reactive to stress.
Yeah.
So that would be another one to add. If what I'm trying to do is give people, if you've been thinking about adding in a meditation practice or a yoga practice and you just find that it hasn't really been worth it, these might be some reasons that you're finally going to
Yeah.
trigger.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You talk quite a bit about dopamine in the book. And, I've seen some research that decreases with menopause along with other neurotransmitters. I hear a lot about my mojo is gone, my motivation is gone. We hear that kind of stuff coming up. What are some ways to give that a natural boost, if you will?
So, when estrogen levels begin to drop, the certain brain circuits that are responsive to dopamine don't fire as vigorously, especially in something called the ventral striatum. The ventral striatum is when it's active, you feel highly motivated and highly rewarded, right? And so, dopamine, I like to think of dopamine as the let's do this chemical, right? So if you're having trouble getting off the couch, dopamine could be part of the problem. It could be too low, and declining levels of estrogen are going to reduce, like I said, the activity of those networks. So getting dopamine levels higher in your brain would be an understandable goal for a lot of women, particularly at this age. So a couple of different things. So these are other kinds of breaks that you could work into your day, particularly if what you need is a motivation boost, or you want to feel, if you're kind of not feeling rewarded, the things that used to bring you joy aren't bringing you joy anymore. That could be also a dopamine related problem. So one of my favorites, and I've now added this as a practice: listen to music that moves you. So researchers are finding that when you listen to music that gives you chills, that those chills are one reflection of your dopamine boost that you get. And what's important here is that you don't just listen to, like, what are the top 40 on Spotify, right? You don't want music that somebody else likes. You want the music that when you listen to it, you're like, oh, that's good. Right? That is going to give you that dopamine boost. For me, my husband and I joke about creating a dopamine playlist. The music, and we'll often do this on, we'll listen to a particular we'll watch a video that just like, oh, that is so good. So you want music that moves you, that will give you a dopamine boost. So that's another break that you can take during the day. Won't affect cortisol levels, but it can help your dopamine. So music that moves you is a nice one. Another one that's surprisingly effective, this one might take a little longer, more like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, is to do something called a values affirmation. And so you first of all want to, get out a notebook or bring up a blank uh, page on a device and write down just briefly, like, one of the things I really value in life is blank, right? So maybe that's integrity, maybe that's my health, maybe that's exercise. For me, I recently did this activity and I identified um, achievement is a high value that I have. It's not the only one, but it's one thing that I really value. Identify that and then begin to journal briefly. Give yourself 5 minutes to identify when is a time in the future when I will get a chance to focus on whatever value you just named. So when is a chance in the near future when I will get to focus on achievement and get to achieve something that matters to me? What they find is that activity of identifying something that you value and then writing about when in the near future will I get to invest in that activity leads to increased activity in the ventral striatum. They didn't measure dopamine directly, but the ventral striatum is basically when it gets activated, it's often because you have an uptick in dopamine and you're feeling motivated, you're feeling rewarded, and so it's an unusual activity, and yet it gets you pumped, even if
Hmm.
the thing that you're writing about has nothing to do with the activity you need to pivot towards and be motivated around. So you could write about like maybe you value your friendships and you're going to get to see a friend this weekend and you're excited about it. As soon as you close that notebook, then immediately begin working on whatever task it was that you were dreading with your work, and you will feel more motivated about it because your ventral striatum, which was kind of dead in the water before you were trying to do this task, is now activated and you feel motivated. What's important about this activity is they compared it with reflecting on a recent time you got to invest in that activity. So thinking about a past time that I had achievement. So thinking about some past big win that I had, or thinking if you value friendships, thinking about the last time I saw my best friend does not do it. You have to think about a future time, even if you're making it up in your mind because you don't know when you're going to get to see your next friend, but here's how I would want to see that person. Here's how I'd want to see her, and here's what we could potentially do together. Dive into the deliciousness, and you're basically giving your ventral striatum a little bit of a bubble bath. And now you're going to feel more motivated for whatever you need to do, even if it's totally unrelated to what you just journaled about.
Love it. I love both of those things. And it's funny that too, when you were talking about especially the music that gives you chills and a dopamine playlist, when I was training for Ironman, there were plenty of times that I really, really, really did not want to go out for my post bike ride run. Even if it was just 20 minutes, it was the most torturous idea in the world to get done with like a 5 hour bike ride. Like, and now I must run. And I had, I had a playlist and I didn't call it my dopamine playlist, but I should have because on the top of, I had a couple, on the top of everyone was One Tree Hill by U2. For whatever reason, the first strains of that always just send me. They always just make me go, oh, the song. And I would sit on the steps covered in sweat and bugs for my bike ride, and I
Right?
would put my earbuds in, and those first notes would come on, and I would lace up my shoes and go out the door.
Brilliant. You stumbled onto a brilliant strategy, right?
Yeah.
And so this would be a reason to create that playlist and use it strategically, right? Use it when you need that boost. And I, I for me right now, I'm really enjoying Shimbuzi. Is that his name?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. And the thing is, I know there'll be a point at which his music doesn't do it for me, but right now it does.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, those are two nice things, and the values affirmation activity is going to seem like it's out of left field. Try it, particularly if you could even do it again if you're in a Zoom meeting where you wish you weren't, like why wasn't this an email? This could have been a team email, not a meeting. Try to do that activity on the side and during 5 minutes when you can zone out and you can come back into the meeting re-engaged.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
So I'm also curious as we come up to the top of the hour here about HRV and vagus nerve stimulation, which is something we hear a lot about in the neuroscience space. We hear a lot about cold plunging. We hear a lot about HRV. What, in your mind, should this audience really take home from those topics?
So here's what I would think would be helpful. So it's helpful to know that the vagus nerve, it's comes from the Latin vagus, like vagabond, so it means wandering, and it wanders from areas in your brain down through near your carotid. It goes down to your heart. It goes down to your gut. It goes through your lungs. So it's wandering. This nerve uh, goes all over, and it send signals in both directions. And the sending signals in both directions is very important because it's one of the nerves, it's controlling the parasympathetic nervous response. So your rest and digest system is in part controlled by your vagus nerve. And what's beautiful about the fact that it runs in both directions is through your breathing, because it comes from your one of the directions, one of the things that it can do is goes directly from your lungs up to your brain. By controlling your breathing, you can tell your brain, hey, everything's okay. All right. I know you don't believe me, but everything's okay. So it's sending a calm down response to your brain. It goes to areas, it goes directly to the prefrontal cortex and it goes to the amygdala. And the amygdala kind of gets a lot of bad press around it's like a threat detector, but it's really it's the, oh my gosh, this is important detector, right? It's like, I need to pay attention right now. It's going to also get activated for things that are very highly rewarding for you. So not just things that are frightening for you. But basically, the if you can do some, just like that 527 breathing that we illustrated earlier, it's one of the, what it will do is it will activate your vagus nerve and send a signal to your prefrontal cortex. It actually increases activity in your prefrontal cortex, which is one of the reasons it improves decision making. It's telling the prefrontal cortex, like, hey, the emergency is over. We can get back into strategizing mode. We have got this. Let's figure out a good solution. We don't just have to be in emergency uh, mode in the moment. But it also calms down the amygdala. It's saying, hey, there's no threat, or the threat is over. We're all okay down here. And it can help you reassess and not just be reacting out of sheer stress and terror. Instead, it can be saying, okay, the threat is gone. It's not as urgent as I thought. Let's reevaluate, what do I need to be doing. So by doing that 527 breath that we did earlier, it's one of the best ways to activate the vagus nerve in a way that calms your body down and your brain. Calms your, or it's not calming all areas. It's activating the areas that help you make good choices, and it's calming down the areas that felt under threat.
I have a couple of follow-up questions with that. One is, where does the cold exposure come into this picture that people talk about for stimulating their vagus nerve? I mean, a lot of the cold plunges and a lot of that is advertised as helping with that stimulation. And how does this connect to HRV?
Okay, so I can answer the second part more easily. I don't know as much about cold plunges and the vagus nerve. One of the things I know that the cold plunges do is they can give you a big hit of dopamine. And so that's one of the things that people do them for. I've done some, and I think there's been discussion, I think with Stacy Sims has talked about, but there's kind of mixed evidence for women
Hmm.
as they get older around cold plunges. I think what the research is showing is that if it's around 60 degrees, it's okay, right? Um, but those polar bear swims in January, maybe not so much. Um, but I don't know about the vagus nerve and uh, cold plunges. What I do know is that in terms of HRV, that when you're, and this is actually what they measure in a lot of these studies, they're not actually directly measuring vagus nerve activation, they're measuring HRV because other researchers have nicely established that when HRV goes up, it's often because the vagus nerve has been stimulated, and your body is calming down. So that 527 breathing, one of the things that it does is it improves HRV, it improves heart rate variability. For those of you who are wondering, heart rate variability, you want high heart rate variability. It's basically your body's being able to respond to stress well, getting your heart rate goes up when it needs to, and it comes back down when the threat is over. And so activating the vagus nerve improves HRV, which has lots of health benefits, long-term cardiovascular benefits, reduces the risk of Alzheimer's. You want higher HRV, not just for athletic performance, but in terms of your longer-term health.
And high HRV relative to yourself, correct?
Correct. Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I've been personally trying to do is doing those 527 breathing, doing that activity as often as I remember to. I usually do it for about 2 to 5 minutes in the morning. And I've watched my HRV go up. It used to be about 40, just according to my Apple Watch, it used to be about 45, and now it's regularly about 57. So not as high as I'd like it to be, but for me, that was an improvement, right? About 30% improvement. So I'll take it.
Yeah. No, and that's why I said because it's all over the map.
Yes,
When you
right.
look at the data on it, the averages, they can give you averages, but people, it's all over the map. So it has to be sort of getting your own baseline and looking relative to yourself.
Exactly, right. And if you can, getting a 30% increase over the course of the year, I think
That's
most people
great.
think that's fabulous. Exactly. So improving HRV means one of the things that could be happening is you're doing a better job activating your parasympathetic nervous system and your vagus nerve.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, this has been super interesting, very informative, useful, delightful, all of the things. Is there anything that we have not talked about, Therese, that you wanted to make sure that our audience got before we wrap up at the top of the hour?
I think the only last one, I want to do a shout out for Yoga Nidra. Is that something you've talked about at all?
That was one of the things I was kind of referring to as deep rest.
Ah, yes, right. Yep. Andrew Huberman refers to it as non-sleep deep rest.
Right, but
I,
it's actually sort of pirated from Yoga
it's
Nidra.
part, it's really Yoga Nidra.
Yeah.
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 Although I see where he's going with that because there have been friends who have recommended Yoga Nidra too, and they get a little skeptical look, and then I reframe it and call it non-sleep deep rest, and they sit up a little straighter. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
I want that. How do I get that? So the idea with Yoga Nidra is you can look on YouTube, you can find plenty of 10-minute videos. You really just, it's going to be an audio. You just want to be listening, actually not watching. But this is something that would involve lying down. I am not someone who naps well, but I will do a 10 to 20-minute Yoga Nidra and I will get up feeling so much recharged. It also research note, granted the research that I've seen on this has been like where they do 70-minute Yoga Nidra sessions.
Whoa.
But they find, yeah, I've never done anything that long, but they find that you get, I think it's a 65% increase in dopamine, right? So huge improvements in dopamine if with that really long yoga nidra. For me, like I said, 10 to 20 minutes is all that I have time for, but I do wake up feeling very motivated and it's like I took a power nap, or at least the power naps that I imagine I wish I could take. I feel that good. So I highly recommend in yoga nidras involving it's a body scan, it's some breathing, it's you're basically lying down and checking in with your senses and checking in with kind of the external world without your mind racing, and it's very calming. So that would be another thing to add to if you're someone who's thinking I, I'd love to take more naps. Short naps doesn't work for me. Yoga Nidra would be something to turn to.
Yeah, and that can be extremely effective. I will do that sometimes, especially when I have a very heavy brain workload. There will be times when my head literally feels heavy. Like it literally feels very heavy. And I just think I must lie my head down. And I will just lie down 10, 15 minutes and fall into whatever that state you're talking about. And it is amazing how I come out of that and I'm like, okay, I can go on.
I can do this. And yeah, and there's plenty of research showing it improves quality of sleep later in the night. So, and you don't have to do it any particular time of day. You could do it right before bed, you could do it earlier in the day, and it will improve your sleep later. So for those of you who are struggling with sleep issues, this is another tool in your arsenal.
Excellent.
Mm.
Well, thank you so, so much for sharing your expertise. This has been delightful, and we will put all of your resources in the show notes so people can find you. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much. There's so much to learn here, and you just do a beautiful job for so many of us.
Thank you. Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with Hilda Dosanya, who recently was awarded the Guinness World Record for the most consecutive days to run a marathon distance in the female category of 366 days. That's a year and a day of running a marathon distance run every day. And I still can't wrap my head around it, but she explains what it was like and what she went through. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause. And please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends. And please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.